Today we're going to be talking about how to not piss off your clients when you prove their security isn't up to snuff. CAT Chief Instructor Brian Harris is here to talk about how he approaches the sticky subject of illustrating security flaws without making the security staff who hired you look bad to their higher-ups. So, Brian, has this ever happened to you?
So, a lot of times people's job, their reputation, or other things might be on the line when you show that they are not doing their job. So whether this is facility managers or security or third-party security, when you come in and you make a breach, it makes them look bad. So you have to go into it, there's a human element of when you've broken in somewhere, you have to understand you are by nature showing that the internal security, whatever that is not doing their job, or that there are loopholes or some type of vulnerability that you're exploiting. Know this going into it. So it does happen a lot. It really does. But the thing that really helps you is if you are aware that you're going to step on eggshells, that you're going to step on people's toes going into it, you can help to frame the engagement, the reporting, how things go by either, giving them a win or making levity of things or giving them solutions or somehow minimizing the failures and screw ups that they're making by you getting inside.
And perhaps also kind of illustrating the commonness of a lot of these flaws, because I know from speaking to you, you see a lot of the things over and over again. So the fact that everybody does this will maybe make them feel less personally attacked.
Yeah, so when it comes down to anything, right? Like, it's not just pen testing. If you take anybody, whether they've designed a website, whether they've created a painting or anything, if you criticize or you point out flaws, it's going to, upset them. And that's an expected human reaction to being basically told that you didn't do your job well. When you go into a pen test, you are literally attempting to find the vulnerabilities and the screw-ups that the internal security have set in place. So when you do the pen test, on the one hand, you need to be sneaky, you need to be stealthy, you need to, locate and abuse these vulnerabilities. But on the other hand, your ultimate job is actually to increase their security, while simultaneously you want the relationship between you and the client to be kind of long-winded. You don't want just them to hire you, you come in, do a pen test, and then them never to talk to you again. You want that relationship to be good. So you have to go into the job knowing and being able to accomplish all of these things simultaneously. And it's really not as easy as you think it is to tell somebody simultaneously that they've screwed up at their job, but you still want a good relationship with them all the same.
Sure, it's kind of like in a way, kind of ego management and people management. Before we started the recording, you mentioned the example of Red Cell and how this very thing led to their demise. What is Red Cell and what happened?
Yeah, so Red Cell was a Navy SEAL group that was spun up in, I think, the 80s. And basically it had one job: run physical pen tests on military installations to assess their physical security. And it went almost exactly like you think it would. A small team of Navy SEALs was able to breach many military installations and accomplish all kinds of things, including planting mock bombs on Air Force One, getting to really sensitive locations within military installations, and even in one instance, kidnapping somebody from the military base and squirreling them away into a hotel room.
Oops.
Yeah, oops, for sure. So the thing that there's now, the demise of Red Cell is very contested as to the exact reason why. But what I can tell you is this: every military installation in the United States is governed by usually a high-ranking general or somebody high up in the military. That includes things like their overall security, the goings-on of the base. They're basically in charge of everything. And when you have a whole bunch of mostly enlisted men breaking into your facility, showing that you're not doing your job well, especially in an environment like the military, which is the military. So security, physical security, is something that they should be good at. When you're showing over and over and over again that a handful of guys who know what they're doing can breach your security and basically do anything they want, and you're powerless to stop them, it really upsets the chain of command. It upsets the higher ups. It makes them look terrible at their job. It makes them look incompetent. And that gives them a black eye. So the unofficial reason why they were disbanded was that they were too good at what they did, and they basically just went around showing that the base commanders and the internal security and the MPs suck at what they do, and they can get, and anyone who knows what they're doing can bypass their security and do anything they want on base. That's really not a good look, especially for a military organization. The official reason why they were disbanded was they went too far, and they did things like kidnapping people from the base, taking them into hotel rooms, and holding them hostage for some time.
So did they go too far? What did they do wrong?
So effectively, I think at the end of the day, what they did wrong was they didn't take into consideration that if they were successful in breaching the buildings, which they were, or the bases, how is that going to make the client look? And how do you actually improve the security? I think that they took everything, those aspects of things, gave them a back seat or paid them lip service, and they were really only focused with the mission, which was get inside the building, which they did dutifully and reliably. The problem is that when you show people over and over, especially people who have egos or whose reputations are on the line, that they suck at their job, they're not doing their job well, or that they're giving their clients false sense of security. So if you've got a third-party security company and that security company says, if under our watch you are totally safe, and then time and time again this other group comes in and shows that that's not true, their reputation is damaged, their business is damaged, and all of these. So you have to actually go into it thinking, once I have compromised the building and I've written a report showing all these vulnerabilities, I have to actually not destroy the relationship with the client. And I don't think that Red Cell, being enlisted military people, really ever cared it or even considered it. And I think that ultimately was their downfall.
So if you were a member of Red Cell, how would you have gone about that mission and also the findings?
Okay, so first things first. The ultimate goal of any security testing, whether that's a web app, whether that's physical, network, Wi-Fi, whatever, when you're doing offensive work, your ultimate job is to increase or improve their security. It is not to tout your own ego. It is not to say, ha, I broke in, you suck, I win. If that's how you view the situation going into it, there's a very good chance the client will never do business with you again because you're going to make them look bad. So when you go into it, if I was a member of Red Cell, now obviously I wouldn't be in charge of it, but if I was a member of Red Cell, what I would argue is, look, we're going to break in. There's a high chance we will. Once we've done it, we need to frame how we did it, first off, clandestinely. You don't want to go out and just tout to every person around saying, ha, I did this, you suck. Second, you need to frame the report and you need to frame how you did things in a way that actually, one, ideally makes the security team look good. So I'll give you an example. There was a organization that I breached a little while ago whose internal security would do regular door checking. So at shift change, you would have a guard walking around the perimeter of the building, open up a door at shift change, check to see that the alarms and sensors still worked, contact the physical SOC and say, I opened door number 5. Did you see door number 5 was opened? The physical SOC would undoubtedly say, yes, we did, and he would move on. Now, and unfortunately, some of the doors were very weathered, and as a result, they either wouldn't latch properly when he would just let them go, or they would take forever to close, 30, 60 seconds for the door to close, and it allowed attackers to, slip in. So on the one hand, you could look at that and you could say, the security staff was not doing its due diligence. They were not ensuring that the doors fully closed properly during shift change, door checking, and as a result, it led for attackers to get into the building. You could say it that way. But you could also say the exact same thing as the physical security was doing their due diligence to meet compliance standards by checking the doors every day at shift change. We monitor them doing this every day. They never missed it. They had a set routine that was within policy for the highest level of security standards. Unfortunately, some of the doors were not checked for their continued function, and which led to a vulnerability. By kind of injecting a praise of what were they doing right combined with what were they doing wrong, it sounds a lot better than just they screwed up.
And also, you're not blaming the person, you're blaming the door.
Right.
So you're kind of giving them a little bit of distance from the blame.
Right. So in essence, if I was on Red Cell, going back to the original question, if you could simply hop a fence, you find if you map out the guards' patrol routes, or you map out where the surveillance cameras are, or anything else, and you find a dead zone, or a dead zone that's mutable, meaning like it's not always a dead zone, but there's a time window where nobody's going to be watching this section. If you can hop a fence, run, 100 meters, and then just be in the base and then blend in, you could say, okay, this is a huge vulnerability. You have this dead zone, whether it's permanent or temporary. You were able to compromise it, etc. The MPs weren't doing their job, etc. Or you could say the MPs were doing their due diligence, but we did notice that there was this temporal, brief window of time, and this is due to a fact that you have too few MPs on base. Right. So that's what that's saying is they're doing their job, but they're doing basically an impossible task of having, let's say, 50 guys watching a 10-mile long fence line. So it's you tend to want to phrase the thing in a way that doesn't place all the blame on the people. Yes, there is blame. Yes, there are vulnerabilities, and it has to be addressed. But how you address it is really important.
Since Red Cell was almost too successful with their physical pen tests on military bases to the point of their own demise, has the security of military bases been improved based on their findings?
Okay, so there are a lot of things that I can't mention about specifics, so there's a lot of things that I won't go into with, what's still vulnerable on military installations. But what I can tell you is publicly published data. So according to the U.S. Navy, between 1 and 3 times a week, some foreign national, usually Russian or Chinese, are attempting to get onto military installations.
Wow.
So this is something this was a report that was put out by the U.S. Navy about a year ago. And what they're saying usually happens is you have foreign nationals that show up claiming that they are students or that they are lost or whatever, and they're just trying to get onto the military base for one seemingly innocent reason or another. Now, sometimes that's actually successful, because if you bang on a door often enough, you're going to find, an open door. It's one of those things that if you have an incident rate of several per week, and you're doing this all across the country to multiple people, there are going to be instances where it succeeds. Mm-hmm. You may have a 99% failure rate of trying to get onto the base, but that 1% that actually succeeds, that's a huge deal. Now, in other instances, there was an instance at Edwards Air Force Base, that is kind of hilarious, because it turned out, now again, this is published data, so this isn't anything, I'm not giving away any secrets. A lot of the contractors had a very specific outfit that they would wear. Pants, clothes, briefcases, etc. A gentleman,
they were wearing pants.
Yeah, they were wearing pants.
Good thing.
Yeah, they didn't show up in shorts. But a gentleman showed up to the military installation at Edwards wearing the exact same outfit with the exact same colored briefcase, but no ID. Mm-hmm. As a result, he was just simply let in. And over the course of several hours, he, kind of like half the day, he wandered all over the base. Sometimes he was on security cameras. Sometimes he just kind of disappeared from the radar, meaning that nobody knows where he was or what he was doing. He ended up getting onto an active tarmac, and he even managed to get onto an active inside of a plane, a military transport plane that's sole purpose was to move VIPs around. Now, we don't know what he was doing a lot of that time. We don't know what he was up to. We don't really know what he was up to on the plane. The only time that he was really accosted it was after being on this VIP plane for some period of time. 2 airmen who were also on the plane eventually went up to him and asked him, "Who are you and why are you here?" Now, here's the part where the story gets really squirrely. Apparently, the entire time he was wandering around the base, he was wearing a hat that kind of looked like Mickey Mouse ears. And so, yes, he was wearing the right pants, shirt, briefcase, etc., but he was wearing something so astronomically absurd on top of it that any person should have stopped him, right? Especially considering he didn't have any ID. But all of this to say, and if you want, I wrote about like a really in-depth thing in the blog, but all of this to say that most of us would look at that and say, okay, you show up to a military installation, you look the part, right? Whether that's fatigues or a dress uniform or the contracting outfit, whatever. You still have to have ID. But this is just one of those instances where It's probably some overworked, underslept MP was at the gate. He sees the same people coming in every single day. They're dressed the exact same way. Somebody shows up and he says, you're probably fine. Just go on in. It's that type of complacency. That's where people get in trouble. And
that's the 1%.
Yeah, that's the 1%. That 1% is the complacency. It is doing the same job over and over and over and over again, and you never are tested. So security comes in 3 parts. It is compliance, which is what tools, equipment, rules, and regulations are needed to keep something safe. Defense, which is how do you use those tools and policies to actually keep you safe. And then offense. The offense is the reality check. We're going to show up, we're going to try and test your security, and we're going to see if the defense are actually doing things that they're supposed to do. The problem when it comes to physical security is that compliance is kind of the gold standard. I would say that on a percentage-wise, compliance is like 70% of security. And then you have about 25 to 30% is defense. And if you're lucky, 5% of that is offense. As a result, the defense are never tested and they become extremely complacent. So when something out of the blue does happen, they're totally unaware or they're totally unprepared because maybe once a year for 1 hour, they get some awareness training of like, well, if somebody who doesn't look the part or they don't have an ID shows up, this is what you do. But when you don't practice or test this on a regular basis, it's really, really hard to jump back into, what should I do? It's kind of like saying when you're fighting, if you've ever been in, done any martial arts or any, fighting of any type, you always default to what your training was. So, you might have a plan going into a fight, but once you start getting tired or the person starts hitting you, all of your planning goes out the window and you just default to what do I train? What does my muscle memory tell me to do? But if your training is once a year for 1 hour at a time, you're going to get some, what happens if what do I do in this situation? You have no training. You have no default. And then it's just up to your best judgment. And if that's what you're relying on, especially in military installations where you have a bunch of 18-year-old idiots and you're relying on their best judgment, sorry, but that's a recipe for failure. And that's what you see.
If offensive testing is sort of the reality check against complacency, do you ever have people who you show them that they're doing things wrong, but they're actually super into it because it gives them a renewed excitement for what they're doing?
So again, this comes down to what the client's goals are. On the civilian side of things, the client's goals are usually one of several factors, meaning why did they hire you to try and break into the building? The first one is, the most common, is that somebody high up, a facility manager, a head of physical security, somebody on the C-suite, somebody sees that somebody with some amount of pull and some small meager budget sees that there's a physical security flaw and they want to do something about it, but they don't have the budget. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the money to actually do anything about it. So their thing is they say, well, we're going to take the meager budget we have and the little bit of authority we have to run a pen test, write up a report, scare the board of directors into taking this seriously. Then we can actually, do something better next year. That's a very common thing. In that case, when you breach the building, they are elated. They're super happy because you did exactly what they wanted. You showed that there is a real flaw. And that could be a lot of things. That could be getting into the server room. That could be getting into the VIP room. That could be bringing in something you're not supposed to. So if you do a physical pen test on like an airport or something, simply bringing in a piece of metal that looks like a gun or something else, past their security, it could be anything. It could be whatever the client needs you to do to show there is a problem. Now, another reason why you might get hired is some industries actually have compliance checking, and that's becoming more and more common, especially in places like Europe where you have CER, where any organization within the critical infrastructure has to increase their physical pen tests or their physical security to the same level as cybersecurity, which when you think about it, that's a lot. That means, if organizations in the critical infrastructure say we have to do cyber pen testing so many times a year, well, now there's very likely to have to also do physical pen testing so many times a year. But then think about how many, let's take just the UK or just Spain. Just take Spain. how many organizations are within critical infrastructure in Spain? You probably have maritime, you have roads, you have hospitals, you have military, you have government, you have communication, energy, water, power, all of these things. And then you think of how many of those things are squirreled all over the country, right? And that's just one country. So you're going to have a lot of these things where, because of regulation, now you actually have to increase your testing. And so, yeah, another big one is compliance checking. And don't get me wrong, I think that it's a really good thing. I think that you need to do this reality checking from time to time to keep the blue team honest. Lastly, you can do it where a rationale for why organizations do these pen testings is just because they have a big budget, or they're actually doing their due diligence. They're saying, look, you hired us 5 months ago to do an audit. We took all the things that you recommended us do to heart. We improved everything. Our security is now up to a high level. We want to do a reality check and make sure that our physical security is doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's probably the best argument for why to do a pen test, is actually realistically test our security. Now, again, I had mentioned previously that, the 18-year-olds who are on the MP duty at military bases, they're using their best judgment. That usually goes wrong. That's not fair. And if I was writing it in a report, that's not how I would say it. I would say that you have probably a 99% success rate. I would say that throughout the course of maybe a 1-month pen test, we attempted to breach the building or the installation, let's say 20 times. And only one of those times were we actually successful. That's how I would write it. I would say your NPs are so good at their job that out of 20 attempts by, black team professionals, only one actually succeeded. That's a 1 in 20 success rate. And that's really good. That shows that they're doing their job. The problem is that that's all that it takes. That one out of 20 chance, or that 1 out of 20 attempt. And here's why. And then you go into all of it. But yeah, you want to phrase it to the client in such a way that you don't damage the relationship. Because again, Red Cell, awesome idea. Have a bunch of highly trained Navy SEALs try to breach into military installations to test their security. Awesome idea. Every military installation, every government organization should be doing this. The problem is that I don't think that they ever really considered the relationship damage by running in and giving the base commanders and the higher-ups, black eyes by saying, you suck at your job.
Absolutely. And one thing, a lot of this is basically just interpersonal skills and understanding people. And I know elicitation is a really important aspect of any physical pen test because it can be such a useful way to get information or to get, through the right door or anything like that. But a lot of the lessons, like, for example, in your elicitation toolbox training course, are relevant for these interpersonal skills.
Right. So one of the things that you want to do when you're trying to elicit, and just a quick primer for anybody who doesn't know, elicitation is basically just trying to subtly get very specific and useful information out of somebody without them realizing you're doing it. The joke is often, what is the best way to get information out of Reddit or any internet forum? And it's not to ask a question. It's to pose the wrong answer. Because as soon as you get on the internet and you say, Pluto is the largest planet, in the solar system. As soon as you make an incorrect statement, within minutes, you will have people dogpiling on you saying, you're wrong, and here's why, here's the right answer, here's my sources, here's this. But if you just ask the question, is Pluto the largest planet in the solar system? You're just fingers crossed hoping to get lucky that somebody takes it upon themselves to give you the right answer. But why does that work? Why does it work so much that if you give somebody the wrong answer, that they're just inclined to tell you? There, so many people have this instinct knee-jerk reaction, like, I have to prove that person's wrong. Well, I go into all of this, in those classes, but it's basically just human nature, and that's what you're relying on with these types of techniques and tricks. So, one of the things that you want to do when you're trying to assess somebody is assess what their needs are. You want to assess their emotional state, and you want to assess what in that moment does that person need. Maybe they need a coffee, maybe they need a shoulder to cry on, maybe they need space, maybe they need somebody to complain about their boss to. You walk past somebody or you see somebody in the periphery and you want to assess immediately what emotional state are they in, what thing do they need in that moment, and then try to provide it to them. So if you can provide, let me give you an example. One of the things that I often ask the students is, when you suppose you've breached a building and you're wandering through the halls And your next goal is to find an employee and ask them something, get information from them, right? Maybe it's, I need to know where the server room is. Maybe it's, I need you to hand over your badge willingly so that I can try to clone it. Something, whatever it is. Maybe it's information, maybe it's a thing. Who do you look for? You're walking through the halls of a building that you've just broken into. What employee do you stop and say, hi, I'm Bob Smith. Would you mind talking to me for 5 minutes? Who do you pick? How do you go about it? And oftentimes what students will tell me is, well, we're going to look for the nicest people. Maybe I'm going to go up to this receptionist. Maybe I'm going to go to somebody who's paid to help me. Well, the problem with doing that is that the receptionist is almost assuredly past or back around all the access control systems. So you basically have to walk out. You've broken into the building. Now you have to walk back out of the building, go to the receptionist, and then talk to that person. But if you're just in the building, who do you pick? But one person that almost nobody says is the grumpy guy, right? We want to look. We have a knee-jerk reaction to look for people who are kind, who are polite, who are civil, and that's really good. You can use nonverbal cues to figure out, who is likely to see you as a non-threat. You can use nonverbal cues to see, who's likely to be friendly to you without ever saying a word, and that's true. But the grumpy guy, the person who is obviously upset, is often a good target because they're wearing their emotions on their sleeve. And the more emotional you are, the less logical you are. Think about it. Like when you're really upset, you're not being rational, you're not being logical, and vice versa. When you're being really rational and very logical, you're not being upset or emotional. If you see the grumpy guy, 9 times out of 10, what the grumpy person needs is validation. They need to vent. They need to complain. They need to just get that frustration off of their chest. So if you can approach them and you can find a way to provide that to them, you just made a really good friend. And you made an asset, you developed that asset. And as a result, just talking to them and offering them a coffee, being a shoulder to cry on, being an ear to listen to their plight and validating what they're saying, within 5 minutes, they'll probably be telling you their life story. And then wherever you steer the conversation, they'll be telling you that too. Who's in charge of this and who has access to that. So the point of that is that understanding that emotional maturity of other people, how to spot where they are emotionally, is really important because it's you don't want to go into this job thinking it's just about you. I broke into a building, that makes me look amazing, that makes you look terrible, and that's how I'm going to phrase everything, and that's how I'm going to write my report. Consider their emotional state, consider how it'll affect you, because your ultimate goal is as a pen tester, your goal is 2 things. Breach into the building, show that you could do it, improve their security, but then also maintain that relationship. And it's that last step that a lot of people don't consider.
Yeah, and that seems to be where, Red Cell fell short.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. And you see that a lot, right? Unfortunately, in the cybersecurity game, there's a lot of people who are very, very good at cybersecurity, but not the best at soft skills. They're not the best at interpersonal relationships and how to, that's, if I asked, what field do you think has the best interpersonal relationships with people, you're probably going to tell me business and sales. Business and salespeople probably have the best way to schmooze and build up relationships and everything else. And unfortunately, when it gets into cyber or physical security, we tend to not have the best aspects of that. We tend to not, see other people as people in the sense of like, how do I build up that relationship and am I good at it? And unfortunately, that is a skill. That's a skill that you might be the best cybersecurity or physical pen tester in the world, and you might be able to hack into every single system. But if your interpersonal skills absolutely suck and you to the point where they couldn't be any worse, then a lot of times clients will hire you to do a job and they'll never hire you a second time because your interpersonal skills are so terrible that they don't want to deal with you, even though you did your job really well.
Is there anything else that you think that we should know about how to navigate that sort of situation of finding flaws but trying not to piss people off?
Right. I think one of the most important things when you're doing this job in this realm is hone the skills that you need to do the job, right? That's paramount. You can't do a pen test if you don't know how and you're not good at it. So of course you need to hone those skills. But you really need to also hone those interpersonal skills so that you can help to build up and maintain the relationship with the client to the point where, think of it this way. Put yourself in the defensive shoes. If somebody came to you and said, if you're in charge of the facility, if you're in charge of physical security, if somebody came to you and says, I was able to show that you absolutely suck at your job to the point where I compromised you 10 ways from Sunday, how do you leave that situation and that conversation with a smile on your face? Think of it that way. Think about, how can I present this information to this client, to this person who I'm showing that they're not doing their job well, or that they had all of these vulnerabilities that they didn't know about or didn't care about. And you want them to leave that situation and conversation with a big smile on their face, eager to work with you again in the future.